Hello, everybody. This is not what we wanted, right? Bitcoin is getting destroyed. It's bad. It's about as bad as it gets. Voice today because I'm unfortunately getting sick. Maybe it's the Bitcoin price making me sick here. I'm not really sure. But yeah, getting crushed. Getting crushed all across the board. That is for sure. So if we're taking a look at what's going on here, I want to just run through the news, show you what's likely happening and where we might go from here. I think this will be helpful so you just get an idea of what could come. So Bitcoin went all the way down to 80,000, a very, very low level, 80,684. It bounced off of that pretty strong and then has now retraced, sitting right around 83,000. I think the big question that everyone's asking is, where are we in the market cycle? Or the psychology of Wall Street here has this chart that a lot of people follow, which is kind of the psychology of a market cycle. And it's difficult to know where exactly we are in this cycle right now. So if we take a look, we can see that we could be in disbelief, but I highly doubt it, right? I don't think we're there as much as I want to believe we're there. I just don't think we are there. I think we are likely here, although I don't think we ever really got to euphoria stage. It's probably most likely, if this chart is accurate, that we're right around here, right in this neck of the woods. If that's the case, we will get a relief rally, right, at some point. So maybe we're here, we go lower, we get that relief rally. That might be an area to really take some profits, or at least lock in profits by setting up some stop losses so you can potentially ride the wave if we continue up with a trailing stop loss, or just get out of town and be done with it. Right? Those are kind of the options of what I see being most likely. Let's dive into some news here. We've got Fear Greed Index at literally its lowest level of the cycle. If you're not familiar with this, some people think this is pseudoscience. Some people think this is the real deal. But it basically shows sort of market sentiment in terms of where people's feelings are. And markets are very psychological, right? There's no question that markets behave like humans behave, because markets are kind of a reflection of human beliefs. And right now, the market has turned very bearish. And I think that's happened for a number of reasons. Number one, I would say people believe that the 4-year cycle is real, and it has proven to be real for a long time, so that makes sense. So people are seeing this as a top, and they are selling. You see a lot of posts about these OG whales selling their positions, figuring the 4-year cycle is done, and it very well may be that this cycle is over. I'm not saying it's not, right? It absolutely could be over. And if that's the case, we're going to trade sideways and lower for an extended period of time until the next bull cycle takes place. That's one possibility. It's not the only possibility, but it is definitely one possibility. The other one is that we're actually not at that crazy level. Let me try to get back to it. We're not here, right? Because we never really had that euphoria. So if that's the case, we would be in one of these other pullbacks. And I don't know where that would be, because the sentiment's so bad that it almost would be, you could argue we were here, we popped all the way up to 125, 126, retracing all the way back down. Yeah, maybe that's possible, but if that's the case, we're going to obviously trend sideways and go lower for a while. If this chart holds, it may or may not. That's to be determined. Let's take a look at some more news. 2-day RSI, the relative strength indicators, at 24. This typically means we will bounce from here. It doesn't guarantee it by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a good indicator. I think regardless of if we're at the top of the cycle or we're not, I think we're going to get a relief rally at some point. Now, are we going to go lower before we get that relief rally? Absolutely could. It's literally impossible to know, but I do think we're going to get a relief rally coming up here. Looking at some more data, according to this guy, there's only 2 other times Bitcoin's history where the RSI has been this low, and they were bottoms of bear markets. Usually sentiment this low and RSI this low is not a top indicator. It's a bottom indicator. However, we are in unprecedented times. I do believe that, because this cycle is very different than the others. The macro business environment is all over the map. Nobody knows what the heck's going to happen next. Are tariffs going to be illegal? Are we going to repay the money? Is the Fed going to cut rates? Are they not? The macro environment, are we in an AI bubble, is so ridiculously uncertain that does not bode well for risk assets, right? It just doesn't. So we're in a huge challenge on what we've got going on there. This was an interesting one. Michael Burry, the famous guy from The Big Short. If you've never seen the movie, it's a great movie. I do recommend it. I saw multiple things that he closed his fund, maybe not, but he was public about taking a short position against Palantir. And that seems to be a good move because he had a $1 billion short position. And since it's down 25%, that's making a lot of money. Right? That is a boatload of money. So he's probably happy to be right in this situation. If we're looking at this crash compared to other crashes, which I think is important, here's what it looks like in terms of liquidations. If you're not familiar with liquidations, in crypto, people can use leverage very differently than the traditional market. Traditional market, you need essentially assets to back up the margin you're using. In crypto, the exchanges basically just give you the money for free, with the difference being if it goes below your liquidation level, then you are liquidated, meaning they take all of the capital. They take that principal that you invested. It's completely wiped out. You can't get it back. And the market saw 1.2 billion in liquidations in the COVID crash, FTX 1.6, and today we're already at 1.9, and I don't think it's over. I think there's more to come. Right? We're absolutely going to see more liquidations because people are going to be trying to catch the bottom using degenerate leverage, 40x leverage or more to try to catch the bottom, and the coins don't have to move much to liquidate those people. So we've got that going out. Tom Lee, if you're not familiar with him, he's got a company where he's buying a ton of Ethereum, essentially the first sort of Ethereum treasury company. Also, he's got fantastic hair. Right? Look at that head of hair. It's wild. But he's really a bull on Ethereum. But he goes on to talk about how the crash may have been sort of a delayed response to that mass liquidation event that happened back on 10/19. So about a month ago, where if you're not familiar with that, even the major coins dropped like 80% in a minute. A lot of them recovered somewhat quickly to at least a reasonable level, but they did not recover fully for some time. And what he goes on to say here is essentially that could have been a glitch because one of the stable coins, I believe it was specifically BUSD, depegged, and it caused this like cascading effect across all the marketplaces. And then a lot of funds are underwater now and have to liquidate their assets as investors show up and say, this isn't working, give me my money back. Or they were trading on a different type of margin and they're getting margin called essentially, and they have to literally give money back or sell assets to close their position. So if that's the case, that would make more sense because we're just getting crushed so rapidly that something just doesn't feel 100% right. Now, of course, like Michael Burry says in The Big Short, being early or being is the same as being wrong, right? That's just what's going on here. You're wrong if you're early. If we're looking here at what the RSI looks like, the relative strength indicator, which is typically a pretty good indicator, and this is on a 1 week time frame. So people look at it to do like swing trades or day trades on a 15-minute time window or 4-hour time window. This is on a week. So this is much more helpful in predicting macro bottoms. If you look, we got all the way down here at the bear market correction before we went on to have a really nice, run. The COVID bottom, we didn't even hit as low as we're basically going right now. And then when we had that massive wick bottom in 22, and you can see we're approaching those levels as well. So stuff like that would indicate we are going to bounce. My concern is that our bounce is going to be this complacency bounce. So if that's the case, let's say Bitcoin's at 82, let's say this was the 126, we're not going to get anywhere near back to 126 if this is the case and we follow this, which I'm not saying we will or we won't. But if we get this, we'll be lucky to get Bitcoin back to, the mid to high 90s, I would say, is where we'll probably get to if we are here. And if that's the case, I am personally going to be locking in as much profit as I can. When I mean that is, I'm not going to sell my positions, and I'm definitely not selling my Bitcoin. I'll ride Bitcoin to zero, right? I will just completely add Bitcoin. I don't think it's going to zero. I think Bitcoin long-term is going to be worth multiple millions in the long term, not this year, not next year. I'm talking way down the road. So I'm not going to sell Bitcoin and try to like time the market. I'm not a trader, especially when it comes to Bitcoin. I'm a holder and a believer. So I'm just going to hold on to this, right? I really am. Now, if we do get that bounce, I'm going to set a lot of trailing stop losses, which is a methodology where you can have a stop loss that's trailing. So if your stop loss means if it gets to this price, sell my position, but the trailing stop loss is even better. Because what that can do is it basically, as the price moves up, it can move up my stop loss. That will help me ride the wave if things go up and make sure I lock in as much profit as possible. Let's go through some more news here. See if there's anything. We've got Swan really diving in and talking about the global liquidity strain, the AI capital vacuum, treasury rollover. I haven't watched this whole thing quite yet, but it's definitely going to be probably worth a watch because Bitcoin can kind of be the canary in the coal mine at times, right? There's no question that Bitcoin can be the canary in the coal mine for the global economy. There's a lot of negative things going on in the global economy. We've got to keep an eye on all of those. There's a lot, I would say my crypto Twitter is literally split 80% bearish, at least on mine. 20% still thinks it's bullish. We have seen these type of retraces in a bull market before, like minus 30+%, but this one just doesn't feel that way. Now, your feelings don't really matter in reality, but markets do behave according to the sentiment and people's feelings. One thing I wanted to give is an overview of some of Bitcoin's crashes because I think this can help give people some hope that regardless of what happens in the short term, Bitcoin has done this time and time and time again. So obviously we're nowhere near 2012. We went from 738 to 380, minus 49%. We had another insane crash in 2012 from 16 to 7. And look at some of these crashes. They're unbelievable. They really are. 3-day correction. Now, people will probably say, hey, that was so early. Moving the price from 259 to 45, super easy because the market cap was so small. And they're right. So we need to kind of look at further when we start to get into much larger market caps for Bitcoin. In 2017, this was before the insane bull run. We went from 1350 to 891, minus 34%, similar to where we are now. We had this, which is a similar dip, this similar dip, 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 and dip. Bitcoin does this time and time and time again. So the question is this going to happen just the way it has in the past? I think we will end up with Bitcoin way higher than it is today. I believe that personally wholeheartedly. It's not investment advice. I believe that wholeheartedly. It just matters when it's going to recover. If we go into the bear market, what does my timeline look like? I can give you kind of that information. If we go into the bear market, I think we're going to spend a lot of time there, right? Because that's just how these things typically work. We go into the bear market, we probably retrace, further, maybe to sort of that previous all-time high around the 70-ish mark, 72, and then we'll trade sideways for a decent chunk of time. And how long? Well, we can just look at other cycles to get an idea of how long some of these recoveries have taken. Right? If we go back out, this is the week chart, by the way, in case anyone's wondering, and take a look at the top of $1,100 down to the very bottom. This was November 2013 to September 15th. So that was a long time. From here to the very bottom, this was December 2017, and we kind of bottomed out 2018. So literally an entire year, right? An entire year for that to come back. This one we topped here, October 21st, 21. We bottomed December, about 10 months later or so. So that's what I'll be looking for if we do go into this bear market. We'll have further dips if that does happen, and then a slow, sort of grind back up. And that's what's going to potentially play out. I would love to see a strong bounce here. It wouldn't mean that we're here in disbelief or something, but we should, no matter what, get this relief rally unless this was the relief rally. The only reason I don't believe that this was a relief rally or this was a relief rally is because we passed all-time highs, right? We went from here down and we passed it. We went down and we passed it. So you could maybe say this was the relief rally, but it just doesn't seem to make sense to me based on the charts that everybody knows and loves to spam on Twitter all day long. It doesn't line up. So I don't think we've gotten the relief rally yet. If we are here, maybe we dip further, like I said, and then we come up for air. So that's going to be an important piece to follow. Now we've got some OG whales, meaning people that bought a very long time ago, selling their positions. There's a bunch of famous ones, people selling literally billions of dollars in crypto. One guy sold like $1.3 billion that bought in 2010. He likely thinks the cycle's over because he has been here for a long time, and that's what he believes. Doesn't mean he's some genius and he's right. It means that he's up, $1.3 billion. Probably want to lock in on that. I think I would sell a good chunk too. I wonder if he's thinking he's going to buy back in lower, or if he's just saying, hey, I'm done. I did it. I made $1 billion. Like, I'm good. And I get that. If I was up $1 billion, it'd probably go into the safest, boring assets, just indexes and stuff, because there's no real need to take on any level of risk when you have that much money. But on the flip side, we've got a Satoshi era whale buying almost 500,000 Ethereum worth 1.25 billion. Now, this guy, according to this, and I haven't dove into this enough to know if he's actually been very accurate in the past, but it's nice to see some OG whales, buying some of these tokens. This was recent. I believe this was today. So this is some of the macroeconomic data. The PMI was 51.9, forecast 52, previous 52.5. Composite PMI, you can see where we're at, a little bit higher. Services PMI, a little bit higher. This data would indicate more likely rate cuts, right? We're going to indicate more likely rate cuts with this data. If we look at Polymarket to get an idea of what they think and what has changed on Polymarket. If you're not familiar with Polymarket, it's pretty cool. Prediction market. You can bet on anything under the sun. And we're going to take a look at what people think, right? Where they're putting their money. So we can see in the last 6 hours, a lot has changed. No change was the most likely outcome, meaning they're not going to change interest rates. 65%. That news came out and we literally went the exact opposite. And now we've got a decrease at 63% and no change at 36%. So people are definitely betting that there is going to be a rate cut 25 basis points, which in theory over time is good for crypto, right? That's for sure. It is good for crypto in the long run. But for now, we're going to be riding this wave. If we take a look at the chart, let's look at the 5-minute chart so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. And we'll look at some more charts here. Yeah, Bitcoin, again, had this great bounce down, trying to bounce back up. The 5-minute RSI is here, but that's pretty tough unless you're like a very, very short-term trader. 15-minute, we're right in the middle. Let's go to an hour. We're still, very oversold, a little bit less than earlier, but definitely still oversold. 4-hour, I believe we're going to be even lower. 4-hour, we are so low. We're like off the chart here. Like we can't really get much lower. 21. And if we go to the day, we're in a very similar spot at 21. The week, the whole thing is pointing for a bounce at some point soon. And that's going to be a very important bounce. If we bounce in a certain way where we reclaim mid to high 90s very rapidly, then there's definitely a case that we're not sort of in this stage. But I'm going to be looking at that very, very, very closely as we get closer because this is a big deal. This is really a big deal where we're at. So I hope this information was useful for everybody. Just trying to give a global landscape of what's going on. I have been dollar cost averaging in right now. I continue to. Will we go lower? We absolutely could. But these prices, I think long term, are a gift. So I will continue to buy here and take a look at that. Hopefully this was helpful. And